Chaos exploded in the council chamber like a bomb going off. Alien representatives jumped up from their seats shouting in dozens of different languages. Translation machines struggled to keep up with all the voices talking at once. Some aliens were angry. Some were scared. Some were amazed. The speaker from the hegemony had gone completely still. His crystal skin had turned a pale blue color, which Yu-Jin knew meant shock and fear. He was staring at his screen showing technical details of human weapons that could destroy his entire home fleet. The files showed weapons called nuclear bombs that could level entire cities. They showed missiles that could fly across continents and hit targets with perfect accuracy. They showed ships that could move underwater for months without being detected. They showed aircraft that could fly faster than sound and higher than most species could even breathe. But the most frightening files showed the wars themselves. Humans had fought other humans in conflicts that lasted for years and killed millions of people. They had fought on land and sea and air, and even in space around their own planet. They had developed strategies and tactics and weapons specifically designed to kill other humans. An insect queen clicked her mandibles rapidly and spoke in her clicking language. The translator said she wanted to know if these files were real or fake. Other aliens nodded and asked the same question. It was hard to believe that the quiet, polite humans could have ever been so violent. Yu-Jin stood calmly in the human section and answered their questions. She said every file was real and could be verified by independent investigation. She said human military historians could provide even more detailed records if needed. The plant mind representative waved his long green tendrils in distress. He said that species who fought such wars usually destroyed themselves completely. He wanted to know how humans had survived their own violence. Yu-Jin smiled for the first time in the meeting. She said that was exactly the point. Humans had learned to stop fighting each other because they realized they could destroy their own world if they continued. They had chosen to work together instead of fighting apart. Supreme Arbiter Chen Dai had been reading files for several minutes. Her smoky body was shifting through colors that Yu-Jin had never seen before. She finally spoke in a voice that sounded smaller than before. Chen Dai said she was looking at records of something called World War II. The files showed that humans had fought this war with over 100 million soldiers involved. The war had lasted for 6 years and killed between 50 and 80 million people. The chamber became quiet again as aliens processed this number. Most species had never fought wars involving more than a few thousand individuals. The idea of millions of people dying in a single conflict was almost impossible to understand. But Chen Dai was not finished reading. She said there were records of other wars too. Wars that had lasted for decades. Wars that had involved entire continents. Wars where humans had developed new technologies just to kill other humans more effectively. An alien from the Federation raised one of his 4 arms to ask a question. He said his species had been watching humans for 50 years. He said human ships were slow and human weapons were weak compared to most galactic standards. He wanted to know where these powerful weapons were hidden. Yu-Jin touched her datapad and sent more files to the chamber. These files showed current human military installations. They showed factories that could build fusion reactors in days instead of months. They showed shipyards that could construct vessels using materials stronger than anything most aliens had ever seen. The files showed that human colonies were not just farming settlements. They were carefully concealed military bases with enough firepower to defend entire star systems. Every human world had weapons hidden underground that could destroy attacking fleets before they got close. Captain Jin Ho was watching everything from his ship outside the station. He received a message from Yu-Jin telling him to prepare the final files. These were the most secret documents of all. These files would show aliens exactly how powerful human technology had become. Jin Ho sent the files to every human ship and colony in the galaxy. Within minutes, the information was being broadcast on every communication channel that humans controlled. The secret was out completely now. There would be no going back. The final files showed human ships that were disguised to look slower than they really were. They showed weapons that had been deliberately weakened to avoid frightening aliens. They showed technologies that humans had developed in secret while pretending to struggle with simple problems. The files revealed that humans could travel faster than any species in the galaxy. They could build weapons that made hegemony guns look like toys. They could construct ships that could survive attacks from entire alien fleets. A representative from the collective spoke with 3 voices at once. She said her species shared one mind across billions of individuals. She said even with all those minds working together, they could not understand how humans had hidden such capabilities for so long. Yujin explained that humans had made a choice 50 years ago when they first met aliens. They had decided to be peaceful neighbors instead of galactic conquerors. They had hidden their true strength to avoid starting wars or making other species afraid. She said humans could have easily taken control of hundreds of star systems when they first entered the galaxy. They could have defeated most alien species in direct combat. They could have become rulers instead of members of the council. But they had chosen not to do those things. The metal builder representative made mechanical sounds that the translator turned into words. He said his species built machines to make life easier for organic beings. He wanted to know why humans built machines to kill other humans. Yujin was quiet for a moment before answering. She said that humans had learned something important from their violent history. She said they had learned that the strongest species was not necessarily the best species. She said they had learned that power without wisdom led to destruction. She said that was why humans had chosen to hide their strength. They wanted to learn how to use power wisely instead of just using it because they could. The chamber was completely silent now as aliens realized what this meant. The species they had considered weak and harmless was actually one of the most dangerous in the galaxy, and they had chosen to be peaceful anyway. Captain Jin Ho walked slowly across the metal bridge of his ship. The Soul Pride was not the biggest ship in space, but it was the first one that Earth had sent to talk with aliens. Through the big windows, he could see hundreds of strange ships floating near the council station. Each ship looked different because each one came from a different world with different people. Some ships were long and thin like needles. Others were round like balls. A few ships seemed to be made of crystal that caught the light from nearby stars. Jin Ho had seen many alien ships before, but he still felt amazed every time. 50 years ago, humans thought they were alone in the universe. Now they knew about thousands of different species living among the stars. The council station was huge. It was bigger than any city on Earth. The station had been built by many species working together. Different sections were made for different types of aliens. Some parts had thick air for water-breathing species. Other parts had thin air for species that came from high mountains. The human section was small and simple compared to the others. Jin Ho touched the datapad in his pocket. Inside that small device were files that could change everything. Admiral So Min had given him these files before he left Earth. She had looked very serious when she handed them to him. The Admiral had said the hegemony was getting bold again. They wanted more human worlds. 3 star systems this time. All 3 had planets rich with rare metals that humans used to build their machines. The hegemony said humans were too weak to protect these worlds properly. They said stronger species should control important resources. Jin Ho knew the hegemony was probably right about one thing. The council would likely vote in their favor. It had happened before with other weak species. When strong aliens wanted something from weak aliens, the council usually said yes. That was just how things worked in the galaxy, but this time might be different. This time Jin Ho carried orders that made his hands shake. If the talks failed, he was supposed to open those files. He was supposed to show the galaxy what humans had been hiding for 50 years. Down in the council station, Ambassador Yujin was getting ready for the meeting. She had spent her whole life learning how to talk with aliens. She knew which species liked direct conversation and which ones preferred to hint at what they wanted. She knew which aliens thought humans smelled bad and which ones thought human voices were too loud. Yujin had always been good at finding peaceful solutions to problems. She believed that any 2 groups could learn to work together if they just talked enough. But she also knew that some problems could not be solved with talking alone. The hegemony representative was already waiting in the meeting room. His name was something humans could not pronounce properly, so everyone just called him the speaker. He was tall like a tree with 6 arms and skin that looked like blue crystal. When light hit him the right way, he sparkled like a jewel. The speaker did not like humans very much. He thought they were soft and weak. He thought they took up space that stronger species could use better. Most species in the galaxy felt the Yusao. Same way about humans. They saw humans as okay neighbors, but not very important ones. Other alien representatives were arriving at the station. Yujin could see them through her window. The collective sent 3 beings that shared one mind. The Hive sent a single creature that spoke for billions back on their home world. The Federation sent their best negotiator who had solved conflicts between dozens of species. All of these aliens had one thing in common. They all thought they knew everything there was to know about humans. They had watched human ships for 50 years. They had seen human colonies and human cities. They had read human books and listened to human music, but they had never seen the files that Jinho carried in his pocket. Yu-Jin walked to her communication device and sent a message to Captain Jinho. She told him that the meeting would start soon. She told him to be ready for anything. Then she opened her own data pad and looked at the same files that Jinho carried. The files were old. Some were from before humans ever left Earth. They showed weapons and ships and battles that no alien had ever heard about. They showed what humans were like before they learned that other species existed. Yujin had read these files many times, but they still made her feel cold inside. They showed a side of humanity that had been hidden since first contact with aliens. They showed what humans could do when they stopped being careful and polite. The files showed what happened when humans stopped pretending to be weak. As she closed the data pad, Yujin wondered if she would have to use this information today. She hoped not. She wanted to solve this problem the way she always solved problems, by talking and finding compromise. But if the hegemony pushed too hard, she might not have a choice. She might have to show the galaxy who humans really were. The meeting room was filling up with alien representatives. Each species sat in their own section with their own type of air and light. The humans sat in a small area near the back. To everyone else, they looked like what they had always looked like, a small, weak species that was trying their best to fit. None of the aliens knew they were about to see something that would change the galaxy forever. None of them knew they were about to learn Earth's true name. The council chamber was the biggest room that most humans had ever seen. The ceiling went up so high that clouds could form near the top. Different sections had different gravity and air, so that all species could be comfortable. Lights moved slowly across the walls, showing star maps and pictures of different worlds. Supreme Arbiter Chen Dai floated in the center of the room. She was from a species that lived in gas clouds, so she did not need solid ground to stand on. Her body looked like colored smoke that moved and changed shape when she talked. She had been the Supreme Arbiter for 20 years and had settled thousands of disputes between different species. Chen Dai made a sound that the translation machines turned into words. She called the meeting to order and explained why everyone was there. The hegemony wanted 3 human star systems. The humans did not want to give them up. The council needed to decide who was right. Ambassador Yu-Jin sat in the human section and watched aliens from across the galaxy. She could see the insect queens with their shiny black shells and clicking mandibles. She could see the plant mines with their long green tendrils that moved like slow snakes. She could see the metal builders whose bodies were made of living machines. All of these species were older than humanity. Most of them controlled dozens or hundreds of star systems. They had technologies that humans could barely understand, and weapons that could destroy entire planets. But they all followed council law because the council kept peace between the species. The speaker from the hegemony rose to make his demands. He was even taller than Yujin remembered, and his crystal skin caught the light from every direction. When he spoke, his voice was deep and hard, like rocks grinding together. The speaker said that humans were wasting the 3 star systems. He said the planets had rare metals that were needed to build important things. He said humans were too weak to mine these metals properly and too weak to protect them from pirates and raiders. The speaker said the hegemony could do both jobs better. They had stronger ships and better weapons and more experience dealing with dangerous situations. He said it would be better for everyone if the hegemony took control of these systems. Other alien representatives nodded as they listened. This was not the first time they had heard such arguments. Strong species often took resources from weak species. It was just how things worked in the galaxy. The weak adapted or they disappeared. Yujin felt anger building in her chest, but she kept her face calm. She had learned long ago that showing emotion in council meetings was seen as weakness. She waited for the speaker to finish his demands, and then she stood up to respond. Yujin spoke in simple, clear words that the translation machines could handle easily. She said that humans had been taking good care of the 3-star systems. She said they had been mining the metals carefully and sharing them with other species through trade. She said that human colonies in those systems had families and children who had lived there their whole lives. She said it would be wrong to force these people to leave their homes just because another species wanted their resources. The speaker made a sound like breaking glass. He said that human feelings did not matter when important resources were at stake. He said that 3 human systems could feed and supply hundreds of hegemony worlds. He said the needs of the many were more important than the wants of the few. Other representatives began to murmur agreement. This was the usual argument, and it usually worked. The council typically sided with species that could make better use of disputed resources. Yujin looked around the chamber and saw that most aliens were already making up their minds. They had heard these arguments many times before, and they knew how such meetings usually ended. The humans would get a small payment for their systems and be told to find new homes somewhere else, but Yujin had not come here to have a usual meeting. She reached into her bag and pulled out her datapad. Her hands were steady, but her heart was beating fast. She was about to do something that no human diplomat had ever done before. She was about to show the galaxy what humans had been hiding. Yujin connected her datapad to the council communication system. She sent files to every alien representative in the chamber. She sent the same files to news organizations across the galaxy. She sent them to military commanders and scientists and anyone else who might be interested. The files were marked with human military codes that most aliens had never seen before. They were stamped with dates from before first contact with alien species. They contained information that no alien government had ever been allowed to see. At first, the alien representatives looked confused. They opened the files expecting to see the usual diplomatic documents. Trade agreements maybe, or population statistics, or mining reports. Instead, they found something completely different. They found ship designs for vessels that moved faster than anything in the Galactic fleet. They found weapon specifications for devices that could crack planets in half. They found battle reports from wars that had involved billions of soldiers and destroyed entire continents. They found records of a species that had fought wars using weapons that could end all life on their world. The chamber became very quiet as alien eyes scanned the documents. Representatives who had been chatting and joking were now staring at their screens in shock. The speaker from the hegemony had stopped, making his demands, and was reading with wide crystal eyes. Yujin watched their faces change as they realized what they were seeing. These were not theoretical weapons or fictional stories. These were real battle reports with real casualties and real destruction. These were records of what humans had done to each other before they learned about aliens. Supreme Arbiter Chendai floated closer to her own screen. Her smoky body was changing colors rapidly, which meant she was either very excited or very frightened. Yujin stood up again and spoke to the silent chamber. She said that for 50 years humans had been hiding their true capabilities. She said they had chosen to limit their technology and their weapons when they joined the galactic community. She said they had done this to avoid frightening other species. She said they had wanted to be good neighbors and peaceful members of the council. But she also said that humans had never forgotten how to build these weapons. They had never forgotten how to fight these wars. The chamber remained silent as aliens processed this information. They were learning that the small, weak species from Earth was not weak at all. They were learning that humans had been choosing to be peaceful. News of the human revelation spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. Every species that had communication networks received the files within hours. Military commanders stopped what they were doing to read battle reports from a species they thought they knew. Scientists abandoned their experiments to study technologies they never imagined existed. The Hegemony High Command received the files while their invasion fleet was already traveling toward human space. Admiral Kethmore had been confident that his ships could easily defeat any human resistance. His fleet had 600 vessels, including massive battleships that could destroy entire cities with single shots. But now Keth Moore was reading reports that made his crystal hands shake. The humans had weapons that could split atoms to create explosions bigger than stars. They had ships that could travel underwater through liquid methane oceans. They had devices that could track enemies across entire solar systems. Most frightening of all were the tactical reports. Humans did not just build powerful weapons. They studied war like other species studied art or music. They had schools dedicated to teaching military strategy. They had generals who spent their entire lives learning how to win battles against impossible odds. Keth Moore called an emergency meeting with his ship commanders. He showed them files about something called the Battle of Stalingrad, where humans had fought for months in a single city. Over 2 million soldiers had been involved. The battle had continued even when buildings were destroyed and streets were filled with rubble. Another file showed the Normandy invasion, where humans had landed on a hostile shore, defended by other humans with powerful weapons. Despite terrible losses, they had continued fighting until they won. The files showed that humans never seemed to give up even when victory looked impossible. The fleet commanders read these reports in growing alarm. They had expected to fight farmers and merchants protected by simple defense platforms. Instead, they were approaching worlds defended by a species that treated warfare as science. On Earth, President Boram was preparing to address her species for the first time in decades. She had been elected to keep humans safe and peaceful, but now she needed to explain why 50 years of secrets were being revealed all at once. Boram had been a young diplomat when humans first made contact with aliens. She remembered the long debates about how much to reveal about human nature. Some people had wanted to show their full strength immediately. Others had wanted to hide it forever. They had chosen a middle path. They would hide their strength, but keep it ready in case it was needed. For 50 years, this plan had worked well. Humans had built good relationships with many species, while secretly preparing for the day when those relationships might not be enough. That day had finally arrived. Boram spoke to cameras that would broadcast her words to every human colony in the galaxy. She also knew that alien governments would be listening to every word she said. She explained that humans had never wanted to frighten anyone. She said they had always preferred to solve problems through talking instead of fighting. She said they still believed that peace was better than war, and cooperation was better than conquest. But she also said that humans would not be pushed around by species who thought they were weak. She said human families and colonies deserved protection from anyone who would harm them. She said there were lines that should not be crossed. Boram announced that all human military forces were being placed on high alert. Hidden bases across human space were activating weapons that had been sleeping for decades. Ships disguised as cargo vessels were revealing their true purpose as warships capable of fighting entire fleets. The president made it clear that humans did not want war with anyone, but if war came to them, they were ready to fight it. Across the galaxy, alien military commanders were pulling up old intelligence reports about human capabilities. Files that had once seemed unimportant now took on new meaning. Human cargo ships that seemed slow might actually be fast attack vessels. Human colonies that looked defenseless might have weapons hidden underground. The collective called an emergency session to discuss the new situation. 3 billion minds connected across space tried to understand how they had been so wrong about humanity for so long. They realized that every human diplomat they had ever met was probably trained in military tactics. Every human trade ship they had inspected was probably capable of fighting much larger vessels. The insect hives began recalculating the balance of power in their region of space. They had always assumed they could defeat human colonies if necessary. Now they realized that human colonies might be able to defeat them instead. Even the ancient plant minds were concerned. They moved so slowly that they thought about problems for years before making decisions. But the human revelation was happening too fast for their usual careful consideration. On the council station, Ambassador Yu Jin was meeting with representatives from dozens of species. Some were angry that humans had deceived them for so long. Some were frightened about what humans might do next. Some were curious about human technologies and wanted to learn more. Yu Jin answered their questions patiently, She explained that humans had not meant to deceive anyone. They had simply chosen not to volunteer information about their military capabilities. She said most species probably had secrets they did not share with others. But she also made it clear that the situation had changed. Humans would no longer pretend to be weak when threatened by stronger species. They would no longer accept unfair demands just to avoid making enemies. The galaxy was learning that humans were not the harmless neighbors they had seemed to be. The universe was holding its breath, waiting to see what would happen when the hegemony fleet reached human space. Admiral Keth Moore made the biggest mistake of his long military career. Despite reading all the files about human warfare capabilities, he decided that humans were still bluffing. He convinced himself that the battle records were old history and that modern humans had grown soft and peaceful. The admiral told his fleet commanders that humans had been living comfortable lives for 50 years. He said they had forgotten how to fight real wars. He said their hidden weapons were probably broken from lack of use and their soldiers were probably untrained farmers pretending to be warriors. Keth Moore believed that one quick, decisive battle would prove human weakness to the entire galaxy. He thought that once other species saw humans defeated, they would stop being impressed by old files and scary stories. The hegemony fleet arrived at the border system of Busan Colony exactly on schedule. The system had been chosen because it contained one of the 3 planets that the hegemony wanted to claim. Intelligence reports said the colony had about 50,000 humans living on 2 small planets. The fleet formed battle formation as they approached the system. 600 ships spread out in a pattern designed to overwhelm any resistance. Massive battleships moved to the front while smaller escort vessels protected the flanks. Everything was proceeding according to standard hegemony tactics. Admiral Keth Moore expected to see a few outdated human defense platforms and maybe some cargo ships trying to evacuate civilians. Instead, his sensors detected something that made no sense according to everything he thought he knew about human capabilities. The sensors showed ships that were moving faster than anything in the hegemony fleet. They showed energy readings from weapons that were more powerful than the main guns on hegemony battleships. They showed defensive systems that seemed to bend space itself around human vessels. Keth Moore stared at his displays in growing confusion. These readings had to be wrong. Human technology was supposed to be decades behind hegemony science. Human ships were supposed to be slow and clumsy compared to the advanced vessels of older species. But the sensors did not lie. The human ships were real, and they were approaching fast. Colonel Minwoo commanded the Human Defense Force for the Busan system. He had been expecting this attack ever since the Revelation files were released. His ships had been hidden throughout, the system disguised as mining equipment and communication satellites. Minwoo had studied hegemony tactics for years, as part of his secret military training. He knew exactly how they liked to fight, and exactly how to counter their strategies. More importantly, he had weapons and ships that no hegemony commander had ever faced before. The colonel opened a communication channel to the hegemony fleet. He spoke in calm, clear words that were translated into the crystal language of the invaders. Minwoo told Admiral Keth Moore that his fleet was not welcome in human space. He said they should turn around and leave immediately. He said that humans did not want to fight but would defend their homes if necessary. Admiral Keth Moore responded with the arrogance of someone who had won hundreds of battles against weaker species. He said that human warnings meant nothing to warriors of the hegemony. He said his fleet would take the planets they wanted, and there was nothing humans could do to stop them. Colonel Minwoo was quiet for a moment before responding. Then he said, something that would be remembered throughout galactic history. He said that humans had spent 50 years learning to be peaceful. He said they had worked hard to control their violent nature and find better ways to solve problems. He said they had hoped never to use their true capabilities against other species. But he also said that some lessons should not have to be taught more than once. The battle began exactly 17 minutes after this conversation ended. Human ships that had looked like simple cargo vessels suddenly revealed their true nature as advanced warships. Weapons emerged from hulls that had seemed empty. Defense systems activated that created barriers of pure energy around human positions. The hegemony fleet fired first using their most powerful weapons. Beams of concentrated plasma that could melt through the armor of any known ship struck human, vessels at point-blank range. Missiles with fusion warheads that could destroy entire cities exploded directly against human shields. The human ships were completely undamaged. Admiral Kethmore watched in horror as his most advanced weapons had no effect at all on human defenses. Energy beams that should have cut through metal like butter simply disappeared when they hit human ships. Missiles that could level mountains exploded harmlessly against barriers that seemed to absorb infinite amounts of damage. Then the humans began to fight back. Human weapons fired projectiles that moved at a significant fraction of light speed. These projectiles hit hegemony ships and simply passed through them, as if the alien vessels were made of smoke. Entire battleships disappeared in flashes of light, as their matter was converted directly into energy. Other human weapons created fields that disrupted the molecular bonds holding hegemony ships together. Massive vessels that had been built to last for centuries fell apart at the atomic level within seconds of being targeted. The most terrifying human weapons seemed to manipulate gravity itself. They created areas of space where the normal laws of physics no longer applied. Hegemony ships caught in these fields were crushed into points smaller than atoms, or stretched apart until they simply ceased to exist. Admiral Kethmore tried to retreat, but found that human ships were everywhere at once. They moved through space, in ways that should have been impossible according to galactic physics. They appeared behind hegemony vessels that had been safely protected by escort ships. They attacked from directions that sensors could not track. The hegemony fleet was not destroyed in the traditional sense of explosions and debris. Instead, ships simply stopped existing as human weapons broke them down at the most basic levels of reality. Within minutes, hundreds of vessels and millions of crew members had been reduced to scattered atoms floating in empty space. Only one hegemony ship survived the battle. Colonel Minwoo had deliberately spared a single escort vessel so that someone could carry news of the defeat back to the hegemony government. The surviving ship captain received a message from Minwoo before being allowed to leave. The message was simple but clear. It said that this was what humans chose not to be when they joined the galactic community. It said other species should please not make humans choose to be this way again. The battle had lasted exactly 17 minutes. News of the hegemony defeat spread across the galaxy even faster than the original Revelation files. Every species with military forces began emergency reviews of their capabilities compared to what humans had just demonstrated. The galaxy realized that the balance of power had not shifted because humans had grown stronger. It had shifted because humans had finally stopped pretending to be weak. The Council emergency session was unlike anything in the thousands of years of galactic history. Representatives who had spent their careers managing small disputes between similar species suddenly faced a complete change in how the universe worked. The careful balance that had kept peace between hundreds of worlds was gone overnight. Supreme Arbiter Chendai floated in the center of the chamber, looking smaller than anyone had ever seen her before. Her smoky body was a pale gray color that meant deep confusion and uncertainty. She had been trained to mediate between species of roughly equal power. She had never dealt with a situation where one species could easily defeat all the others combined. The chamber was filled with nervous energy as representatives tried to understand what the human victory meant for their own worlds. Species that had felt safe under Council protection now wondered if those protections meant anything. Military commanders who had built their careers on accepted facts about galactic warfare found that all their knowledge was suddenly worthless. Ambassador Yujin entered the chamber and walked to the human section. Every alien eye followed her movement as she took her seat. She looked exactly the same as she had during the previous meeting, but everyone knew that everything had changed. She was no longer representing a small, weak species asking for help. She was speaking for the most dangerous military force the galaxy had ever seen. The hegemony section was empty. Their government had recalled all diplomatic representatives immediately after receiving news of the fleet destruction. Rumors said that the entire hegemony military was in emergency session, trying to figure out how to respond to a defeat that should have been impossible. Yujin stood up and addressed the silent chamber. She spoke in the same calm voice she had always used, but her words carried new weight now that everyone understood what humans were capable of. She said that humans had never wanted this situation to develop. She said they had worked for 50 years to be good members of the Galactic community. She said they had hoped to solve the current crisis through normal diplomatic channels. But she also said that humans would no longer accept unfair treatment just because other species thought they were weak. She said human colonies and families deserved the same protections and rights as any other species in the galaxy. Yu Jin made it clear that humans were not interested in conquering anyone or taking control of alien worlds. She said they still believed in the council system and wanted to work within galactic law whenever possible. However, she also said that humans would defend themselves against any species that threatened them. She said the demonstration at Busan colony should be seen as a warning rather than an attack. She said humans hoped it would be the only such demonstration needed. An insect queen clicked her mandibles rapidly and asked what humans expected from the council now that their true strength was known. Other representatives leaned forward to hear the answer. Everyone understood that this response could determine the future of galactic civilization. Yu Jin was quiet for a moment before responding. Then she said something that surprised everyone in the chamber. She said humans wanted exactly the same things they had always wanted: fair treatment under galactic law, peaceful trade with other species, protection for their colonies and families, the right to live their own lives without interference from stronger neighbors. The plant mind representative waved his tendrils in confusion. He said that species with overwhelming military power usually demanded tribute or territory or special privileges. He wanted to know why humans were different. Yu Jin smiled and explained that humans had learned important lessons from their violent history. She said they had discovered that conquest and domination led to rebellion and resentment. She said they had found that the strongest species was not necessarily the happiest species. She said humans had chosen to be protectors rather than conquerors because protection created friends while conquest created enemies. The metal builder representative asked a question that many aliens were thinking. He wanted to know if humans would use their power to help other species that were threatened by stronger neighbors. Yu Jin said that humans would consider such requests carefully. She said they were willing to help species that were being treated unfairly, but they would not interfere in legitimate disputes. She said humans believed in justice but also respected the right of different species to solve their own problems. Over the following weeks, species across the galaxy began making their choices about how to deal with the new reality. Some, like the hegemony, chose isolation and withdrawal. They pulled their fleets back to their home systems and stopped making demands on weaker neighbors. Pride prevented them from admitting